and for this section, I just want to show you just sort of hands-on what it looks like to annotate a text. So I've gone ahead and I've brought the same lecture we were looking at in the last clip over into a document so I can take some digital annotations in this case. And again, you can do this digitally if you want to on your computer. You can print out the lecture and hand write it. There's really no wrong way to do this as long as it works for you. So just to recap at this point, where I'm at in the process, I've gone through Thieves. I've acquainted myself with the parts of the text. I've looked at the headings. I have a pretty good idea what the main idea is. I know what the reading level is all about. I'm comfortable with moving ahead, taking some notes. I've even gone through and actually read all the way through the lecture without taking any notes the first time. And the reason for that is if you're anything like me and you are really overzealous with the highlighter, you start reading and you start highlighting everything, and then suddenly your page is sort of day glow pink. I like pink highlighters. It's not very useful to you later when you go back and you look at your notes and you're like, wow, I guess I thought everything was important in this reading. So I like to read all the way through first. I don't take any notes at all. That way I know what's coming. And then on second read, that's really when I dig in and I start to make my annotations. So kind of go with me on this journey. We've already read all the way through it. We know what we want to take notes on now, and we're actually just going to go back and get that task done. So I'm going to start with looking at some dates. Dates are really important in history because it kind of gives us context on a timeline of like, when is this happening compared to now? So in this introduction paragraph, it sets me up really nicely. There's several dates that we want to focus on. So I'm going to come in with my highlighter, and it says, when the stock market crashed in 1929. So I'm going to mark this as an important date. It sort of marks when the beginning of this hardship began. And then the second part is when the Great Depression hit. So we know right after 1929, we've started the Great Depression. So if I continue through this introduction paragraph, we've got a couple other dates. In the early 1930s, a drought hit the Great Plains. So I'm going to mark this. We've got on April 25th, 1934, Anne wrote an account in her diary. So I'm going to mark that just because it's really giving me context of when this is happening. And since I typically don't like to highlight and just leave things on their own, I'm going to make a note in the margin. In this case, I'm going to type it. That helps me review later. So I'm just going to write stock market crash equals 1929, and then I'm going to abbreviate Great Depression 1930s. That way I have my timeline started. It's really easy to refer back to later. As we continue to read through this introduction, like I said, we have this tag here. Anne wrote an account in her diary, and we've got this really nice quote about what it was like to live through this horrible time when the deadly dust storms came. So I'm just going to make myself a note for later. What it was like to live through the deadly dust storms. I might need this if I'm writing a paper and I want evidence later. I might want to just review it. Anytime we can think about, what's happening to real people, how do they experience this? It's really helpful to put things into perspective. Another thing that I'm looking for in this introduction, and I might have already found it when I was doing Thieves, but I'm looking for the main idea. So I'm going to kind of go to this last paragraph here. The droughts and winds lasted for more than 7 years. Dust storms in Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Oklahoma, and Texas were a great hardship, but only one of many that Americans faced during the Great Depression. So this is giving me a really good idea so far. We're focusing on a number of different things. We're focusing on droughts, So I'm going to come in with my highlighter and again, just kind of mark some of these areas. So we've got droughts, we've got winds, we've got dust storms as being potential main ideas of the reading as some of the hardships that were faced. But down here it also says one of many. So we know, okay, the rest of this reading, it's going to give us more background information on what the other hardships were. So again, I'm going to come in with my note-taking tool. I'm going to make a note. Main idea is going to be hardships during the Great Depression. And then I'll make a note, droughts, wind, dust storms, and then maybe and more. So that way I know what I'm focusing on when I'm doing more notes in this reading is the and more. I want to add to this list as I go. So after I find this main idea, I'm just going to continue down in my reading. So part 2, my heading says, the Depression devastates people's lives. So we know this section, we have a pretty good indication is going to focus on what's happening to people. What are some of the negative effects of the Great Depression on people's lives? So just looking at this first paragraph as a lead-in, statistics such as unemployment rate tell only part of the story of the Great Depression. So kind of like above, you know, we have dust storms, we have droughts, but there's going to be more to the story. More important was the impact it had on people's lives. The Depression brought hardship, homelessness, and hunger to millions. So again, I'm going to come back in with my highlight tool, and I might just grab this piece on hardship, homelessness, and hunger to millions. So not only are we dealing with unemployment, but we're also dealing with these other hardships, and hopefully we're going to find out more about how this impacted people as we read on. As we read in this next section, the Depression in the cities, it starts to talk about cities across the country. People lost their jobs. Okay, we've got unemployment highlighted up here. They were evicted from their homes and ended up on the streets. We've got homelessness highlighted. Some slept in parks or sewer pipes and wrapped themselves in newspaper to fend off the cold. So we're really starting to dig in to a lot of these hardships. So I'm going to start making a connection now. And when we annotate, we don't always have to just highlight what's in the text. We can also start writing down what's in our head. So to me, right away, this is making me think back to 2009 and what happened with the recession. So I'm just going to make a note here. This reminds me of the recession in 2009. And then I'm just going to make a little note to ask the teacher later. Is this kind of similar to the housing bubble? And then I also, this gets me thinking, all right, recession, it sounds similar to depression, but it's different. So maybe recession versus depression. How are they different? And this might be a really good thing to follow up on. I can do my own research, or I can ask my teacher later on. If we keep reading here, let's see. Others built makeshift shacks out of scrap materials. Before long, numerous shanty towns, and if I remember back to the vocabulary that was important in the reading, I think shanty towns was one of my vocabulary words that were listed. So let's find out, what is a shanty town? Little towns consisting of shacks. Okay, so maybe I want to take my highlight over, and then I'll just make a note. Shanty town equals town of shacks, so I can refer back to that later. And already this has already got me thinking of something else. There are a lot of unhoused people today. Like if you travel in Seattle, you see it. In Tacoma, it's happening. The pandemic has not been kind to a lot of folks. So this is making me think, I wonder if shanty towns are anything like tent cities. And maybe this is something that I could look up later. I could see some pictures of shanty towns to get a better mental image of what this is like. So I'm trying to make those connections as I read to things that I'm thinking about now, because history doesn't just stop when the event is over. We're still experiencing and making new history today. So this has just been a really short demonstration of some of the things that you can write and mark as you're taking annotations in your text. You can look for dates. You can look for main ideas. You can look for, you can ask yourself questions. You can make connections to the text. You can start comparing, what's going on in your text to what's happening now. You can mark certain vocabulary words that are important. But most of all, it's really just having this conversation with your text, being active in what you're doing, and it's going to help you learn more, get more understanding out of what you're reading, and then help it stick with you longer. Even past just passing this class down the road, this information might stick in your long-term memory better.